Reordering to-dos is quite an important part of any productivity app. How can we let the user reorder a list view in Flutter though? Well, let's see. Hello, welcome to Reso Code, where we are getting prepared for real app development so that you will get freelance clients or a job and be confident about the apps you build. So subscribe and hit the bell to join us on our quest for becoming in-demand Flutter developers. In this part, we are finally going to implement the reorderable list view using the implicitly animated reorderable list package. So by the end of this tutorial, in the app that we are currently building, we'll be able to select a to-do from the node form page and drag it up, which is going to reorder it. So now learn about Socrates will be first, read Plato's Republic will be second. Or for example here, learn from the written post will be first. Cool, so this is what we are going to implement in this part. So the first step for us to do is, of course, to go to pubspec YAML and add that aforementioned package, which is implicitly animated reorderable list. Now I'm going to use the pubspec assist extension for VS Code, so implicitly animated, and that's enough. Reorderable list. Currently it's at version 0.3.0, and of course you can always get this code from the link in the video description so that you can just copy and paste it and not have to type it yourself. So now on the emulator, let's go ahead and switch to our app which we are currently developing so that we can see the changes in real time with hot reload. And let's go to the to-do list widget, which we were implementing in the previous part also. And now what we are going to do is swap out this ListView.builder, this basic list view, for the implicitly reorderable list view. Now, I'm not going to cover this package in its entirety. Maybe in some separate tutorial I will do that. For now, we are just going to focus on the parts which are absolutely needed to get this job done so that we can reorder our to-dos, which we currently cannot do, as you can see. So this will be just sort of a brief overview. Let's cover what we really need to and nothing more, all right? Just so that we can get the job done. So the widget which we want to use from that package, which we have just added, is called implicitly animated reorderable list. That seems correct. So we have auto imported that package already. And unlike usual list view, this class is actually generic. And we want to provide the class which is going to represent the individual items. I do not mean the widget class, the to-do tile. By the class, I mean the data. So in our case, we are representing to-do item primitives, right? So we're going to say that the generic parameter is to-do item primitive, just like this. Now, of course, we do have a bunch of errors in here saying that we are missing a bunch of required parameters. This is going to come in just a bit. But basically, we do want to leave the shrink wrap to be true still, so that it resizes. It's a bit more expensive operation, as I've said in the previous episodes, but we do need to have a shrink wrap here because we are basically inside a scroll view. So whenever you have a nested list view inside another scrollable, you absolutely do need to have shrink wrap true. Outside of this shrink wrap, it seems that all of the other parameters are kind of full of errors. So what's up with that? Well, for example, item count, we are no longer provide the item count, but instead we're going to provide items. And these items are going to be the form to-dos, and these form to-dos, we want to convert them to a list, right? So we're gonna say value as list, because the value is currently a KT list. Of course, KT list is here just for the purposes of our own code, because we want to work with immutable data, immutable lists. But when it comes to third-party libraries, they can most likely work only with the regular lists. So that's why we need to convert it to a regular Dart list. Before fixing the item builder, which is still here, but it has a sort of a different signature a bit, we will add additional parameters which are not present in the usual ListView. So those are items the same, which is just a function which grants us an old item and a new item, which is of course of type toDoItem primitive, since this is the generic type of this list. And how can we compare two toDoItem primitives for their equality? Well, they all have an ID, and if an ID of a todo is the same, that means that the whole todo, which it represents, is the same. So items are the same if the old items ID and new items ID are equal. The next parameter is going to be another function on reorder finished. This one is required, and it will pass us all of these parameters, which are item, from, to, and new items. Item is the just reordered toDoItem primitive. From and to are indexes from which that item has moved to some other index. And basically we are not interested in these parameters at all whatsoever. So we can just ignore the todo or the item, from, and to parameters. But what we are interested in is the new items, which simply is a list of the new item configuration after the reorder is finished. So after the user stopped dragging the item to reorder it, these new items are in the new order of the to-dos. The reorder operation is again just another action of the user. So just like when the user taps this, for example, checkbox, we first modify the primitives and then we modify the node form block, or we actually add the to-dos changed event to it. So again, even in this case, reordering is a user action. So we first want to modify the primitives and then pass this event to the block, to-dos changed. So let's do just that. Over here inside on reorder finished, we're going to say that context.form to-dos are now modified. So we are going to reassign them to be equal to the new items to immutable list. Because of course, new items are just a regular list, but we want them to be the KT list. So we just say to immutable list to convert it. And then we say context block, context, of course. We want to get the node form block, and on it we are going to add an event, node form event, to-dos changed, and just pass along the context form to-dos. Good. Now, why do we have an error on the item builder? Well, that's because if you take a close look, its signature is totally different. Sure, we are still passed a build context and an integer, which is an index, but then we also get an animation double and the toDoItem primitive, which this currently built item represents. So we need to modify the function signature. So we're going to add item animation, which is of course representing the animation when the user, for example, long presses and starts dragging the to-do item, right? Or the to-do tile, to be more precise. And then we have the item, which this currently built item represents. This is of type toDoItem primitive. The item builder of an implicitly animated reorderable list cannot return just any old widget, but it has to be a reorderable. So what we need to do is wrap this to-do tile inside reorderable, or actually not even wrap it, because if we take a look, reorderable offers us a builder, not a child. So we need to grab this to-do tile, cut it out, and add a builder function with these parameters. And for now, let's just simply return a to-do tile from here. This reorderable widget is basically responsible for the reorderability. As you can see, it knows everything about what's going on with the reorderable widget. For example, if the user is currently dragging it, it passes along the animation again. This is the drag animation. So we need to use this, and it also works in conjunction with another widget, which I'm going to, spoiler alert, reveal it to you right now. We are going to use it a bit later in this part. That widget is called handle. And this handle widget works together with these reorderables. And the handle is a widget which the user can tap so that the reordering starts. For example, when we go to the finished app, now we have pressed the handle widget, right? So this is what's going on, and the handle works in close cooperation with the reorderable widget. But that is for some later time. What's now important is that we again have an error on the reorderable widget. So why is that? Well, we are missing a key parameter which is required, because of course reordering things in the list view requires us to use keys, because otherwise we would just get one mess from the list view. After reordering, we would see the old values on the same places and nothing would change, and it would look completely wrong. So that's why we need to use keys so that each widget is uniquely identified. Basically, what we want to do is just move the value key from the to-do tile to the reorderable, like this. But if we take a look here, we are accessing the form to-dos at index and then getting the ID. But we no longer really need to do that here, because we already have the toDoItem primitive passed into the item builder. So we can just say item, and we have spared some milliseconds or nanoseconds even, because we no longer access the list. We just have the item straight in here. We are currently not using any of the animations which are passed in any way. We are going to in just a bit, but for now, let's focus on the real work and then worry about styling later, okay? So inside the to-do tile, we need to absolutely add a handle so that the user has something to drag the to-do tile by. So where are we going to add it? Well, it's going to be a trailing on the list tile. So let's add trailing. And it's going to be a handle, which you could have seen for a brief moment already. And its child can be anything. We're just going to say it's going to be an icon. And the icon will be icons list. Okay. Now we can make this constant. And as you can see, we have this nice icon at the right side of the list tile, and we should be able to drag it, and sure enough we are. And as you can see, it works. So we can drag hello to the top. Previously it was at the bottom. Now we can save this, and hello, sure enough, is now the first item even inside Firestore. Now we can add another one. Hey, right? Save it. Now it's there. Drag hey to be the second one. And it works. So the functionality is already implemented, which is great, but we cannot say that it looks up to par. I mean, the animation is not even present, it's just dragged, there is no shadow being cast, and it's transparent, so the texts are overlapping, and it looks horrible. So we need to also style it so that this app is actually considered production ready, because I don't think that you would want to release this kind of a horrible looking app. So what can we do about it? Well, we can use some material widgets, add some elevation, and it's all going to look great. Oh, and also don't forget about using transitions, which are just awesome. So first up, material. This is going to prevent this transparency. So the background will be filled in, and also material will allow us to add elevation very easily so that the shadow will be cast below the widget when we are dragging it. So let's wrap this container on the to-do tile. This container will be wrapped with material. Let's save that, and immediately there is no real transparency, so that's nice. Let's now play with the elevation around a bit. For now we are just going to hard code it, so elevation, let's say 4. All right, and as you can see, it looks quite interesting. If you take a look at the bottommost widget, let's just increase the elevation so that it looks even more visible. We can see that the materials elevation does not really follow the outline of the container. It's the elevation is happening across the whole width of the screen and not just where the container's outline ends. Also, the elevation does not copy the border, which is rounded, but it's just a straight line. So what can we do about that? Well, currently this container has a margin, but this spacing cannot be a margin of the container which is inside the material, but instead we need to pad the material too. So we need to have the spacing outside of the material, and we need the material to copy the container's box decoration border totally exactly how it is. So for this, we're going to cut this margin, remove it from the container, create a padding above the material, pass the edge insets to be of the padding. All right, here we go. And it starts to look a bit better already, but still you can see that the material does not respect the rounded corners of the container. Hopefully on YouTube you can see it too, but there are sharp corners on the material. So what we are going to do about that is that we need to add border radius, again circular 8, even on the material, not just on the box decoration of the container. So let's just copy that from the box decoration, paste it in there, and now the material copies the look of the container's outline fully. All right, this is great, but we do not want the elevation to be specified constantly by us in the code, but we actually want this elevation to change depending on whether the user is currently dragging the to-do tile or not. So we need to add a field to our to-do tile, which is gonna be called elevation, of course. So final double elevation. Then we also want to add it to the constructor, but it's actually not going to be a required name parameter. It's going to be optional. So let's say double elevation. We're not even going to assign the elevation field directly, but instead we're going to let this elevation be unassigned. And if it is unassigned in the constructor, then we want to set the class field to have 0 elevation, which we can do in Dart just like this. So elevation, which is the field, is equal to elevation, which is coming from the constructor. And if it is or null, not 0, if this elevation coming from the constructor, right here, it's null, it's unassigned by the user or by the client code, let's say, then the field will be assigned a 0. Of course, it wouldn't hurt if we have a comma in here. But if the elevation is assigned in the constructor, of course, then the field will be equal to that elevation from the constructor. And then we want to use this elevation field as the elevation for the material. Okay. And lastly, we will want to add animation duration to this material so that whenever the elevation is changed, it takes a particular amount of time. And here it's gonna be good if it takes up milliseconds, 50 of them. So when we change the elevation, let's say again manually to 8, it's going to take 50 milliseconds for this elevation to be applied, but let's revert back to currently 0. Let's now dynamically change this elevation for each and every to-do tile depending on whether the user is currently dragging the reorderable thingy here or not. So how can we pass an elevation to the to-do tile, which is going to be dynamically changed based on the drag animation's value? Drag animation is an animation double, so just a regular kind of an animation, the most typical one in Flutter anyway. Hopefully, if you are this far in this tutorial series, you already know something about animations, and if not, you can always check out my tutorials, for example, from the card in the corner. But basically, each animation has a value, and this value can be from 0 to 1. So technically, what we could do is take this animation value and paste it to be the elevation of the to-do tile. And now, if a user starts dragging a to-do tile, it's going to have a very, very slight elevation. It's going to have a really slight shadow. I'm not even sure if you can see it on YouTube, but it's really there. But it's just 1 unit big, or how to say it, 1 unit raised from the canvas, all right, in the material terms. But we want this animation to be a bit bigger. For example, let's say that the maximum value should be 4. So we can say times 4 here. And since the maximum value of an animation is 1, that means that, well, if it's 1 times 4, that's 4. And it looks like this. In addition to this elevation change, which may or may not be enough for your use case, I mean, it looks good as it is now, we also want to shrink the to-do tile a bit when the drag animation starts. I'm not even sure if it's correct like UI-wise, because I think that we should actually enlarge the to-do tile when the drag starts, because elevation in material means that something is moving closer to you, so it should be bigger than it was while the elevation was 0. But anyway, I'm not a designer, so don't sue me for this, please. I mean, material design is not something that I'm doing. for a living, but I think that actually shrinking the to-do tile is going to look good as well, although it's probably not correct in the material design sense of design, I don't know. So basically, what we can do is wrap this with a widget, scale transition, and the scale will be a tween double. And we are using a tween because we actually want to reverse the progression of the animation, because usually animations go from 0 to 1. But since we want to shrink something, we need it to go from 1 to some lower value, which is in our case going to be 0.95. So this is what we are using tweens for. Tweens can completely alter the progression of an animation to whatever you like. You can even change the type from double to some other type, for example, I don't know, offset, which is not a double. But we just want to have a double here, which goes from beginning 1 to its ending point 0.95. All right, and then say animate, which returns an animation. And the animation which is going to drive this tween is the drag animation, of course, which is in control of the reordering stuff. So now when we start dragging something, it shrinks, it has elevation, and it looks quite nice in my opinion. So let's again reorder this so that hey will be first. Save that. It still works, and now it even looks quite nice. And we can still delete a to-do tile like this. But as you can see, it looks kind of funny because after we press delete, it takes some time for it to be deleted. Now we have multiple options. We can use a remove item builder, which passes us all of this, and add another kind of a transition, for example, fade transition, so that the removed item would be animated away. But I'm going to leave that as a homework for you. If you want to have an animation for removing an item, just implement it using this. But the quicker solution here, if we do not even want to have any kind of a removal animation, is to simply set the duration for removing an item to simply, 0 seconds. So we're going to say remove duration is const duration, and it's going to be, it doesn't matter, milliseconds, 0. I hope that this is actually a valid value. Should be. Yep, it is. And actually 0 is the default for the duration when it's constructed without any arguments in the constructor. So we can just say something like this. It's going to be 0 by default. Cool. And this is it for this part, where you have learned how to successfully build a reorderable list using the implicitly animated reorderable list package. Now, if I am not mistaken, the only thing that's left in this series is to add security rules to Firestore, which I have decided to postpone to the last part. So if I'm correct, the next part will be the last one, where we are going to actually write some security rules for Firestore so that everything is nicely secure and nobody can tamper with our users' data. So if you want to get the code written in this episode, be sure to check out the link from the video description where you can find that code as always, and also subscribe to this channel if you don't want to miss more tutorials like this, and also join notification squad by hitting the bell button to make sure you grow your Flutter skills, because here on ReSoCoder, I am determined to provide you with the best tutorials and resources so that you will become an in-demand Flutter developer. And if you are serious about becoming a great Flutter developer who can build real apps for clients or at a job, go to flutter.education, link is also in the video description by the way, to get the top curated Flutter news and resources aimed at improving your app development career. Over there you can also subscribe to my mailing list to get the best Flutter resources delivered weekly right into your inbox. If this video helped you, give it a like and also share it with other developers who are surely going to benefit from knowing how to find their way around implicitly animated reorderable lists. Leave a comment if you have anything to say, and see you in the next video and possibly in the last part of this series. See you there.